I'm back, and I'm back to the best news possible. Been waiting years to do this show. The Buffalo Sabres have fired Kevyn Adams.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody, and welcome into this Monday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch the show wherever you want to watch. That's going to be on YouTube, though, so be sure to check it out there. Hit the like and subscribe button if you would like to watch along. You can become a part of our Locked On Sabres text club at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. But we really want to push you towards our new feature that we're having a lot of fun with, our Everydayers Club. If you are not already a member, you could sign up for that. Take it to the next level. You get our show ad-free. You can get access to our private Discord, which that's where I'm having a lot of fun during these games in this news that we just had about Kevyn Adams in the last couple of moments as well. Members only Discord, that's available to you as well, all for just $5 a month, or $50 a year, which is a better price per month. So you could do that as well. I'd recommend doing that. Our members are having a lot of fun with it through the first week. You can go to lockedonsabres.supercast.com and you can sign up for the Everydayer Club there. Sneaky Joe DiBiase here on a Monday. Today's episode is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com. Place your NFL live bets all season long. Sneaky Joe DiBiase, we have breaking news in the last hour or so. We've been waiting for it for a couple of days. There has been a lot of smoke about this happening, and here it is. The Buffalo Sabres have officially, after 5.5 long years, 6 seasons, the Sabres have relieved Kevyn Adams of his duties as general manager. As the fan base erupts in celebration, which could be cruel to the man, as he was, a local guy and is still, I'm assuming, going to be a local guy. That's what the Sabres did to deserve this situation where the fan base is going to treat this as the best news that it has had in a long, long, long time. And it was a long time coming. They finally did it. The decision was reportedly made during the road trip, which is kind of what makes sense. All that smoke, all the rumors, then the reporting from Tim Graham and Matthew Fairburn about sources in the team saying that they had been having internal discussions and, well, where's Jarmo Kekalainen? And people are tracking his plane, and there's just a lot of that going on. I was watching all that go down while I had the flu for the last week, and it was killing me to not be in front of the microphone while all of that was happening, because I like solving puzzles. I like living in the smoke of, this story is developing, but we don't really know if this is true, but this is a pretty concrete report here. So what does that mean? I love doing all that, and not having to sit on the sidelines for a couple of days was absolutely the worst. Those are the shows I love to do. I mean, when they are 12 points out of the playoffs in January, February, and March, not as good as, I've got someone telling me that there could be real change coming to the team. That's the stuff you really want to sink your teeth into. Which, by the way, I do want to thank the Buffalo Sabres for waiting exactly the right amount of days until I could do this show. Because literally, if this had happened yesterday or Saturday or Friday, I would have had no voice or no ability to talk for more than 8 seconds at a time without going into a massive cough attack. So appreciate the Sabres doing that and waiting till Monday to do this. Although that does make all the sense in the world that if they were going to do it, it was going to be today, because the team got back late last night from their West Coast trip. Adams was on the trip, so maybe they wanted to do that face-to-face. It would be weird, I guess, to do it when they're all out west. Also, today is a good news day locally where you can kind of hide it if you really wanted to because of all the reaction to the Bills comeback from yesterday. So there's a lot to get to. There's a lot to get to, and we're going to do multiple shows, tons of shows throughout this week that are just related to Adams being out and Jarmo Kekalainen being named the full-time general manager. He will meet with the media on Tuesday at 10:30, so we'll look forward to listening to what Jarmo has to say, going back into his career, of course. We will do that as well over the coming days. But today I really do want to just get into Adams, the tenure, the decision to finally remove him, why it took so long, and really I just want to start at the beginning with Kevyn Adams. And I guess actually before we even do that, the Sabres did release a statement. Terry Pegula released a very clearly prepared statement. This has been in the works for a couple of days. He says, Kevyn Adams has been relieved of his duties as general manager of the Buffalo Sabres. I would like to thank Kevin for his dedication and loyalty to the Buffalo Sabres. He has been a reliable presence, and we are appreciative of his enduring care and commitment. Personally wish him and his family all the best. We are not where we need to be as an organization, and we are moving forward with new leadership within our hockey operations department. We are dedicated to building an organization that is competitive year after year, and we have fallen short of that expectation. That on Adams. No, duh. You have not been a consistent organization, competitive organization year after year. Chris Johnston of Sportsnet pointed out that in the years, the 5 full seasons of Kevyn Adams as general manager, they finished in the NHL 31st, 24th, 20th, 22nd, 26th, and this year they were currently tied for 24th. They never finished above 20th in a single season with this guy at the head of the totem pole in the organization. And we'll get to the moves and the trades. I really have a lot to say in the direction of the team that he took in. But this guy was, from the outset, not thought to be a qualified general manager for the job. When we would have gone back and figured out, when he was hired originally, what happened here, there's nothing that would have spoken to, okay, he's qualified to do this. Kevyn Adams, reminder, his last job before becoming GM of the Buffalo Sabres was senior vice president of business administration. In the National Hockey League, you do not jump from senior VP of business administration to general manager. That does not happen. And you can say, a number of different things as to why that jump happened. It was that the Pegulas felt let down by the hockey world, and they had said that, so they wanted to go with somebody that they trust, and Kevyn Adams had been a Pegula guy for years and years. You could say it was because Kevyn Adams was willing to fire people during COVID and make those calls, and Jason Botterill was not. You could say that's why that it happened, and there would be a lot of legs, I think, to both of those. But whatever you get to, it's definitely not, he was a rising star in the hockey world as an executive. That was not the case at all. And then how did it look? It looked about the way you would expect it to look for a guy who's never been a GM of his own, never been groomed up to be a GM, never been an assistant GM, and never really worked in a meaningful way in an NHL hockey department. He was an assistant coach. His highest level of employment on the hockey side of things was assistant coach under Lindy Ruff years and years ago. So did it look like a professional GM ever? In the entirety of the time that Adams had his finger on the button, did it feel like he was a professional, a real GM? Because what you got right away was a petty fight with Jack Eichel that he took over a surgery, and that might have been his owner's doing. But he certainly didn't handle it much better either. I mean, the way that they had this viciousness towards him in the public and this stripping him of the captaincy, I think picking a fight with Adams on that front didn't ever sit well with me. You had the palm trees press conference, which of course everybody will remember, which was excuse making for why you couldn't get players to come here, even though the real reason was you hadn't built up a good team in 4 years. You had crying about Zemgus Girgensons when you traded him away, like just way overvaluing the meaning of a couple of bad players on your team that were veterans and that wanted to be a part of the solution. They're not good, but they wanted to be here and they wanted to fix things. So that's really what being a Buffalo Sabre is all about. I mean, Kyle Okposo standing by him the way that Kevyn Adams did. Same thing, like getting emotional about Kyle Okposo in the midst of a season where he had led a revolt against the fans. Getting mad about the rumor about Matthias Samuelsson last summer when everybody was looking around going, doesn't that make sense? Why are you saying the fans would be upset? Just, there was never a feeling that you had a strong professional general manager at the helm. Ever. They never, ever got that feeling. And that was predictable. That was absolutely predictable. And I think what fans are mostly excited about with getting Jarmo Kekalainen is a feeling that somebody that knows how to do the job is now doing the job. I'm reminded of when the Bills they actually went years without really having a real general manager during the playoff drought. When Ralph was in his 90s, Ralph Wilson was in his 90s, and he wasn't doing things really anymore. And it was a lot of Russ Brandon, who, again, was a business guy that's being the GM just because they're not going to really hire another one. And I remember when they hired like Buddy Nixon, then even to Doug Whaley, and those guys were not good at their jobs. I'm hoping, of course, that Jarmo can be better at their jobs than those two were. But it was, we got a GM again. We actually got a real GM again. That, to me, is how I feel right now, is they've not had a real GM for years, and now they're back towards having one. And that gives me optimism. Just any sort of change. It was so needed. You had the Fire Adams chance a couple of months, not even a couple months ago, a couple of weeks ago in the crowd, and Pegula was there. We clearly knew from Adams' press conference at the end of last season that there was a chance he was going to be fired at the end of last year because he didn't know if he was going to be back. That's where I'm not stunned. I guess I'm not stunned because it sounded like he needed to convince Pegula of a plan to come back for this year, which means they had already given thought to him not being the GM. So if you'd already given thought to it and this season started out the way that it did, not a surprise of where we've really ended up here. Adams is out. As we look back on his tenure as GM, some of the trades he made, but really my big problem with the direction of the team when he was at the helm. That when we return here on Locked On Sabres. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. Well, how can you find amazing candidates fast, easy? Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page, helps you reach the right candidates a lot faster. If you've been in that spot where you need the right hire like yesterday, the pressure is on, every day without the right person is a setback, that's exactly when Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in handy. They make sure that your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now, you can speed up your hiring process. $75 sponsored job credit. So go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. We have a new general manager. Kevyn Adams has been fired by the Buffalo Sabres. The exact lettering is relieved of his duties. I got this question from a few in our Discord. I do not know whether that means he's been outright fired and no longer working in any capacity for the organization. My guess is he still will be to some degree. Maybe it's back on the business end. Maybe it's in the Academy of Hockey. I mean, it could be something anywhere. But relieved of his duties as GM, I think means that he still could be somewhere in the organization. Do not believe he is working in the hockey department in any capacity in the future. That, to me, would be stunning. Do not think that that's going to happen. As we look back on the last 5.5 years, we had some numbers earlier this month. one of the longest tenure GMs in the National Hockey League ever that did not make the postseason. He is actually superseded on that list by Steve Yzerman in Detroit, but there are not many in the NHL ever that got this long without ever making it to the postseason. And my biggest problem with Adams, and I've made this known about the organization for a couple of years now, that this team took the wrong steps after they missed the playoffs by 1 point. And I would imagine a lot of that is to do with the GM and his perceived idea of how are we going to go from a 90-point team that missed by a point to getting into the postseason and being a consistent playoff team. And instead of saying, well, what we just did work, and we are one of the fastest, most offensively skilled teams in the NHL within our system, instead of staying on that path and getting a better goaltender, they decided, and I'm sure a lot of this was Adams, you are the front man for the whole team, hockey department wise. Let's decide to go a completely different direction. Let's play defense. Let's play pack it in. Don't take as many chances. Don't play up and down the ice as much. All the things that made them special in the year that they almost made it. Let's scrap that and let's try to be something completely different. And they've been searching around in the desert for 3 years since that decision was made, and they have never found their way back. They've never come close to being as good as they were before they made that decision. And I personally don't believe that Don Granato is the one that made that decision, because there was nothing about Don Granato's resume before that that said that's what he would have wanted. And within that line of thinking of, well, our problem wasn't fixing issues around our scoring strength. It was taking your scoring strength and moving it to a different area of the game. They never figured out goalie while Kevyn Adams was the general manager. And I think that one of the fatal flaws of Adams' tenure as GM, and I think there were outcomes where it could have actually worked, but for that to happen, you can't get it that wrong in goal. He was far too patient with goalie. In his entire time as the general manager, as the Buffalo Sabres, the biggest goalie acquisition he ever made was acquiring a prospect in Devin Levi in a Sam Reinhart trade where he wasn't even the number one piece. Not only can you go into Levi and how many times they were committed to him and how they didn't trade for a goalie in 22-23 because they were afraid they were going to lose him. And then each of the next 2 seasons, they went into those seasons assuming that he was going to be able to take a next step, and he wasn't able to do that. Within all of that, their other big mistake while Adams was the GM was they always felt a commitment to Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. The entire time, there was an assumption made from day one till the last day, really, that that's our guy, UPL. And I think by tying yourself at the hip to him, it helped sink Kevyn Adams, because for 6 years, really, he made his debut for the Buffalo Sabres in Ralph Kruger's last year in 2020-21, the COVID year. In those 6 years, he only one time showed the ability to be a number one goaltender. And they ran with that. They completely ran with it by paying him and not making other supplementary moves around him. And UPL, I think, is one of the biggest culprits who sunk Kevyn Adams. Not the only. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can look at, but goalie is a big one. And I think he helped stop Adams from doing anything of consequence around the position. Even if Levi's there, maybe they do something else. But UPL, they treated him like a veteran almost, and that was maybe their biggest mistake. What's funny about that is Adams didn't even draft UPL. He wasn't like an Adams guy. That's not why you would be so committed to him. He also, was he a Jason Botterill guy? Jason Botterill, yeah, he was Botterill's first draft, 2017. So Murray had just been fired. The previous GM's guy, which you were that tied to him, it just never felt right or made sense. And I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that Adams made was he never figured out goalie. One other issue you could have with Kevyn Adams and the direction of the team that he took them in. You could certainly look back on his first 3 seasons as GM of the Buffalo Sabres and say, it took you way too long to go to say kids and prospects and giving all of those guys their breathing room and creating spots for them, that it took way too long for the franchise to turn from a mentality of youth and development to winning. This is at the end of the season. They missed the playoffs by 1 point. And John Worrow of the AP pushed Adams in the end of season press conference, where I think Worrow called the season a failure because they missed the playoffs, which honestly, looking back, is not even that strong an opinion. Like, you missed the playoffs, it's a failed season. And Adams took such grave offense to the idea that season was a failure because they didn't get in. It showed, I think, a weakness that was your third year as GM, and you were not viewing things in a scope of winning being what measures a season. And it took way too long for them to get into that mindset. It was the 4th year. This is hockey. Hockey does not take that long if you're a good organization to flip things around and to be like, well, but in their 4th year, we'll be ready to go. That's not how it should be done. When we come back, want to take a quick look at some of the trade history of Kevyn Adams as we look back on it and the lack of trades when we return here on Locked On Sabres. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL Sundays move quick. That one big play, suddenly everything feels different. And that makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you are reacting to it in real time. Not just live betting, too. You got your futures. You want to, maybe you're fueled up by the Sabre news and you want to go bet them to make the playoffs. Plus 360 right now. Not too bad, by the way, on the odds for that. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action is unfolding. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment, but also out into the future as well. Live betting, though, is best when the game starts to shift. You know, a receiver getting hot or defense tightening up, momentum flips after a turnover. Had a lot of that yesterday in the Bills game. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads, money lines that are adjusting instantly. You can bet next touchdown score, drive results, totals, and plenty more. Keeps it locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com. Place your NFL live bets all year long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Wrapping things up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, we'll take a very quick look at the trade history of Kevyn Adams. And then tomorrow, lots of Jarmo Kekalainen. We're tracking down Jay Forster from Locked On Blue Jackets. We're going to talk about his perspective on the Columbus side of things, how things went for Jarmo there. I'll take a look at Jarmo's career from my perspective because I have some feelings about what he did with the Blue Jackets. So all of that coming up. Not going to get a lot more into Adams today, honestly, because the voice is starting to go, and I want to be here for the rest of the week for you to talk about Jarmo and all the things that are coming. Also, maybe news isn't done. We'll see what happens to coach and other things around the roster. I don't know that we're done for this week. You might be thinking, Adams, that's the big news. Like, what else could really come? Well, coach could be one of them, maybe assistant coaches. I actually don't know. That's pure guessing. But all I know is they might not be done, and I don't know what that means. So you can only guess again that like what that does mean. Maybe Eric Stahl is the news that's to come, and he'll be out. How would he not be already, though? He's only there because of Adams. Get all the 06 Hurricanes out of the front office. That's what I say. Very quick look at the trade history of Kevyn Adams that he leaves, it's few and far between. The trades aren't actually that bad. Like, I don't mind the Norris trade right now. I love the McLeod trade right now, even though Savoy's been scoring a little lately. I don't mind the Middlestat for Byram trade. I don't love Bo Byram, but Middlestat is kind of nothing at this point. And any other trade you look at, it's hard to really qualify as a loss when trade a second-round pick. Ooh, second-round picks are not really that valuable, for even if it's for Jordan Greenway or Beck Malenstein. The biggest problem with his trade history is he took over the job in 2020, and he made his teardown trades. He traded Eichel away. He traded Reinhardt away. He traded Ristolainen away. He never made a meaningful trade from the day he was hired in 2020 until, like, a meaningful trade to get better until 2023 when he traded a second-round pick for Jordan Greenway. That took 3 years, and it was for a middle six guy. That was the biggest problem of his trade history. It just took forever to get the wheel rolling. Forever. And I think it's another reason why we are sitting here today talking about him being dismissed as the team's general manager. Kevyn Adams is out. I know fans are excited. It really just change brings possibilities. We know at the end of the day, the Sabres' reputation league-wide was horrible. And I think a big reason for that was people did not respect the person that was leading their hockey department. I think that is true. And now they have a real hockey man in there. And I think you can only imagine the improvement that the reputation of this team could have league-wide for players, for coaches, for other people that want to work in hockey departments, and hope that Jarmo Kekalainen, he's not Scotty Bowman coming in here, but he's a professional GM, and they haven't had one of those in a while. You can go, how long you want to go back? Because Botterill wasn't that. Murray wasn't that. I loved Murray, but he wasn't that. Decades. All right, that'll do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Reminder, if you would like to become a part of our Locked On Sabres Everydayers Club, you could do that. Head over to lockedonsabres.supercast.com. We're going to have our private Discord and ad-free shows. That's available to you there. $5 a month. Great deal. That'll do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.